Entering 2020, the future of both U.S. DPRK relations and the Korean Peninsula itself are once again full of uncertainty. Since the historic meeting between President Trump and chairman of the DPRK, Kim Jong Un, in June, interactions seem to have stagnated. Pyongyang tried to prod Washington into a more conciliatory stance, issuing an end-of-year deadline. A senior DPRK official then ratcheted up tensions this month by threatening to deliver a Christmas gift to America. The U.S. responded by reportedly flying spy planes over the Korean Peninsula. Meanwhile, China and Russia have drafted a resolution at the UN to push for political resolution of the issue. Could their proposal break the impasse? And where does the standoff go next? I'm pleased to be joined by Zhao Tong, a senior fellow with the Carnegie-Tsinghua Center for Global Policy, and Einar Tangen, a current affairs commentator. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. So, a brief look back at what happened over the past year. We had this summit between the two sides in Vietnam in February, and then they met in the demilitarized zone in June. I mean, U.S. President Donald Trump and DPRK leader Kim Jong Un. But October, we saw the working level talks fell apart in Stockholm, and then there is the Christmas threat that was announced. Exactly what happened that we were experiencing such a trajectory of relations, Dr. Zhao?
Well, basically, I think after the failure of the Hanoi summit, North Korea resumed its coercive diplomatic strategy to force the United States to soften its position and to offer North Korea with something it really wants, which is a significant economic sanction removal and to terminate permanently the U.S.-South Korean bilateral military drills. And the U.S. was a little unwilling to do that, so North Korea stepped up the tensions, starting with short-range missile tests, conducted one medium-range missile test, and now starting to test the engines for large ICBMs. So it is increasing the tensions basically to coerce U.S. into making more concessions.
So basically you're saying the DPRK is very much at fault for the deterioration of the relationship?
Well, I think there is definitely a perception gap. The U.S. believes that it has offered a wide range of more practical and flexible options at Stockholm by Steve Biegun, the special representative. But they believed the North Korean basically walked out of the meeting after reading a prepared statement condemning the U.S. position. But from the North Korean perspective, they have conducted unilateral concessions. They have torn down one important missile engine test stand, even though they reinstalled that facility later. So I think they need to sit down at the operational level to talk out their disagreements.
Yeah. Einar, your take of what has happened and why it has happened this way?
Well, I mean, you have an asymmetrical problem, and you have somebody who's trying to deal with in a transactional matter. I mean, there's structural issues. The DPRK has been trying to develop its nuclear arsenal for these 70 years. And they're not going to give them up unilaterally just because Donald Trump wants to score an election victory. Donald Trump entered into this with no real long-term strategy. He wasn't prepared to do that. He wanted a quick win of some sort. And unfortunately, that is not how you approach these things. These things take a tremendous amount of time. There's a lot of detail. All the things that you talked about sitting down. I mean, it was weird what happened when they met, and basically they just walked away from each other. I mean, where was the preparation? Those meetings are only supposed to be for handshakes, signatures, and smiles and optics. Obviously, it wasn't prepared.
So some people were saying we were seeing some kind of a roller coaster ride of the relationship. The two sides were very hawkish at each other in 2017, and 2018 seemed to warmed up considerably, but now 2019 we're kind of back to the cold reality. Or all along it has been too rosy to be true, too good to be true.
Well, look, there were six-party talks for a long period of time. And what this did was it put 5 nations basically sitting down with North Korea and saying, listen, let's try to figure this out. And they're all necessary. You cannot have a solution to this without China. You can't have a solution without Japan, Russia, U.S., South Korea. These are all the people there. When Donald Trump departed and says he's going to be a cowboy and go it alone and take all the credit for all the good stuff that was going to happen, it didn't happen. So this is a massive failure on his part.
It was a drama spanning 2 years. Zhao Tong, your take?
Well, I think the two countries started when their positions were far apart. So actually they have made some progress. Their positions were closer than before. Now they're at a point where if they both move one step further, they may be able to reach an interim deal. North Korea is willing to put the Yongbyon nuclear complex on the table. The U.S. within the administration also shows greater willingness to consider more flexible options, including softening some sanctions under maybe a time limit or with a snapback mechanism. I think that's the practical way that both sides should.
Is there a but there? I mean, you say both sides are willing, but does it look like it's doable, it's possible anytime soon?
I think there is hope among all the capitals. The reason why North Korea did not deliver the Christmas gift is to wait longer to see what happens with Washington.
Okay, I want to read out what DPRK Chairman Kim Jong Un said only Monday, which is yesterday, at the third day session of the 5th plenary meeting of the 7th Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea. He said his government is preparing positive and offensive political, diplomatic and military countermeasures for firmly preserving the sovereignty and security of the country. Is he saying something new? Is he sending any particular message, Dr. Zhao?
I think he's basically repeating the possibility that North Korea will take a new path, which I think basically means if there is no American concession, North Korea would go back to major military provocations, including maybe long-range missile tests. From the North Korean perspective, those provocations would increase its leverage in future negotiations with the United States. But there is a risk that North Korea might miscalculate and will actually get...
I'm going to disagree a little bit. I think what they'll be doing is they'll be walking away from basically the U.S. What they want is security assurances that their regime will stay intact. That could be given by Russia. They also want money to restart their economy, and I think they're looking at China. China has its own issues, but it might be a priority to settle this, because you don't want a nuclear arms race being touched off by a nuclear North Korea spreading to South Korea, Japan, perhaps Indonesia, Malaysia, and everywhere else. So from China's perspective, I think they're trying to look at this on a more regional, global point of view and decide what needs to be done. Because if they're not having any joy talking to the U.S., threatening the U.S. isn't going to get the U.S. to give anything to North Korea. It's impossible politically.
All right. At least at this moment, China and Russia, together with Russia, is still trying very hard to push for political resolution of this issue. On December the 16th, China and Russia jointly proposed a draft resolution at the UN Security Council, and Ambassador Zhang Jing, China's permanent representative to the UN, said the core purpose of proposing the draft resolution by China and Russia is to maintain the momentum for a political settlement and properly accommodate the DPRK's concern on easing sanctions in the livelihood area. It is a good attempt to break the current deadlock of the U.S. DPRK dialogue. However, the Reuters has reported that it's a move that some diplomats say has little support. Dr. Zhao, how much support is there for this initiative? And despite the level of support that may be low, why do you think China and Russia tabled this resolution?
I think Russia and China tabled this resolution because they saw this maybe the last chance to break the impasse.
Why the last? You mean the last before the end of the year, or the last before when?
Well, the last before the deadline set by North Korea, because...
Which is end of the year, which is today.
End of today, but for the United States there is 12 more hours. So if there is no breakthrough, I think U.S. and China and Russia fear there is something that can happen terribly regarding missile tests, etc. So they want to, I think, put more pressure on the United States. They believe the United States have not returned to, with North Korea's unilateral concessions with enough rewards to North Korea by be willing to removing some of the sanctions. So there is this call for removal of sanctions, but I think that can be made practical if we consider some time limit and a snapback mechanism, but also given the bilateral diplomatic process between North Korea and the United States has not resulted in any major progress. There's a call from Russia and China that this process should be broadened to Sixparty talks. Hopefully, more players can offer more credible security assurance to DPRK.
Einar, what is your take of the kind of possibility that maybe the deadline will not be missed? I mean, should we stay up for the next 12 hours to wait for anything to happen from between those two sides?
It's almost impossible to know. You know that something has to happen because otherwise...
well, not the next 2 hours, 12 hours, by the way, only next
well, exactly
2 hours.
New Year's, so I mean 2 hours plus 24, maybe it's 26 hours. I don't know exactly how they look at this, but I think it's doubtful that they'll let it pass without doing it. There's already been some reticence because nothing showed up as a Christmas present. I think there will be something. The question is, what is it? Will he kidnap some people or things like that? In this situation, we're not talking about good people, good actors. All right, we're talking about people who just fundamentally don't understand each other and don't want to at this point. So the best thing we can hope for is that the DPRK stops trying to go at this kind of antagonistic relationship with the U.S., which could result in war, and instead turns to China and Russia and says, look, can we solve this?
Yeah. Dr. Zhao, do you expect anything to happen within the next 12 hours to 24 hours?
Well, I think it's certainly up to North Korea to interpret, what the deadline it sets really means. But I think we'll get a clear idea because Kim Jong Un would deliver a New Year's speech tomorrow.
All right, let's all wait and see.